What is your statement on dreads or hair braiding by Muslim men, and how do you suggest or advise them? Many who are young and heavily influenced by athletes and so-called stars. Well, of course, wearing dreadlocks is un-Islamic. It's un-Islamic. And it's particularly forbidden because of the fact that it is a symbol of Rastafarianism, a system which believes that Haile Selassie, the former ruler of Ethiopia, was God incarnate. That's their belief. Of course, they claim, that this was sort of like the natural way, and this is how the people back home, it was became like an African thing. But actually, a good friend of mine from Jamaica, who had been living in England, he told me that when he had gone, he and a couple of his friends, they decided to do this tour of Africa, and they'd gone to Egypt, and they had all their hair in dreadlocks, and they had it inside of these big caps that they were wearing, right? For those who don't know what dreadlocks are, I think everybody knows, right? Is there anybody who doesn't know what dreadlocks are? You don't know what dreadlocks? It's people, basically what they've done, they've let their hair grow without combing it, so it just mats and locks up together into these clumps of hair, and you see it. I'm sure you've seen pictures of people with it, long hair, maybe hanging down to their backs. Even white Americans have also taken it on because it's, identified with hip culture or whatever. Anyway, so this group, the Rastafarians, this is a basic practice of theirs. Bob Marley, he was sort of like the expression of that. Anyway, these brothers, so the hair, when it gets real long, what they do is they put it up and they put a cap, which is a kind of a loose knit cap, so it can all fold inside of it. So it's like a thing on top of their heads. So these two brothers, they were telling me that when they went to Egypt, right, they weren't Muslims at the time. They'd gone to Egypt, and they ran out of money. And, they were trying to beg some money. They couldn't hardly communicate. Nobody would give them anything, right? Eventually, they just were so hungry. They went into this restaurant. They tried to beg. Some people were eating. They refused them. And the brother, just in his frustration, he said, "Man, why don't you people help us?" He pulled his hair. His hair came out. The people ran out of the restaurant. I thought he was a madman. I thought he was insane, really. And really, in truth, as they said, really, as we traveled and we went into Ethiopia, it was the mad people. You have some people, they're insane, they're just wandering the streets. These are the people who have their hair like that. They didn't find any other people, So I thought it was quite comical. Anyway, the point is that to do this is to identify with a culture of kufr, of shirk. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man tashabbaha biqawmin fahuwa minhum." Whoever imitates the way of a people is of them. If a sister accepts the interpretations of Ibn Abbas about hijab, is it okay to apply only half of the ruling, wearing the niqab but no gloves? Anyway, I don't know how that came in, because the niqab was not a requirement. It is something commendable. A woman who does it is rewarded by Allah, but it is not an obligation. Of course, there are some scholars who do hold it's an obligation, but the vast majority of scholarship and the evidence, as I have seen it, indicates that it is not an obligation. So if a woman decides to wear niqab and not wear gloves, even wearing of gloves is not a requirement. Or she decides to wear niqab and wear gloves, and she also wants to wear socks, she can do it. But to make that now a requirement for all the women, now this becomes oppressive. And for her to look at the sisters who don't do it as being half-stepping Muslims, they're a couple of notches down, this is again wrong. It's mistaken. We choose to do more, inshallah we get the reward for it. Others who may not be doing what we're doing in that regard may be doing other things in other areas far more than we're doing. So, Allah is the one ultimately to judge those things, and He judges according to taqwa. where the kafirs, the disbelievers, take on a fashion, it becomes a popular fashion, for Muslims to imitate that fashion is wrong. Islamically, you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. Muslims should distinguish themselves from the non-Muslims. Haircuts, like almost like the crew cut, where the hair is long on the top and short on the sides. Yeah, these kind of practices, this is known to be popular non-Muslim fashion. Of course, as Muslims, we should not take these things on. Of course, how you cut your hair, there's going to be some non-Muslims cutting their hair in a similar way. So it doesn't mean to say that the only option for you is to cut your hair in a way that no non-Muslim cuts his hair. No, I'm not saying this. But I'm saying where they have taken on specific fashions. And you can see it, the fashions, they go through cycles. They do this for a while, then they switch to that, and they switch to that. So as Muslims, we should not be following their fashion. When they become like this, we're this. When they come like that, we're that. And no. Prophet ﷺ said, the believer is not imma. He is just like a chameleon. Whichever way this goes, he's there. Wherever it goes that way, he's there. It's just following. He becomes a slave to fashion. The Nike symbols and these things, becoming a slave to fashion, and the labels and these kind of things. The outer garment has conditions, that it is not beautiful in and of itself. Very colorful, very flowery, so it becomes a means of attraction, because you are cancelling what the purpose of the jilbab is. The purpose of the jilbab is to neutralize yourself, right? That you are not an object of beauty where people are attracted to you because of beauty. So it's not to say, on the other hand, now you have to wear the most crumpled up, wrinkled up, torn up clothing that you go outside in. I'm not saying that either. That's going to another extreme, right? But the point is that your outer garment should be plain. I'm not saying it has to be black, because of course some people say, no, it doesn't have to be black. It's cultural. If you choose black, it's fine. It should be colors which are not themselves bright. Bright yellows or bright, things which are colorful and attractive to the eye. Flowery with embroidery and, things which are all beautification. It's plain old beautification. And you chose that particular khimar or that particular dress because it's beautiful. That's why you chose it. It's attractive. So we need to deal with that and take garments which are neutral, which downplay the attractiveness, the beauty aspect of dress. No, there's no hadith of preference. It only described the women as being like crows. I mean, the crow, the black crow, the garment that they wear in the abaya, which went from the head to the top, from behind at a distance, they would look like a crow in that sense, right? So it described that's how they were dressed, but it was not specifying that was the color. We don't have any specification for color. If a woman sought or desired not to be seen by men, obviously she meant who? Surely not her husband, right? She meant men who she could marry. She tried to avoid being seen by them. And Islam commends that a woman tried to avoid the glances of men, etc., and things which would invite those glances. This is from Islam. What is the first book in English you would recommend for church-going Canadians who want to understand Islam? Well, what I would try to do is I would try to find out from them what do they know of Islam first. And if they know nothing, there's a pamphlet which was done by the Saudi embassy called Understanding Islam and Muslims. I revised it and we printed up and used it for dawah in the Emirates and that region. And I think it is quite simple, it's quite colorful. It shows pictures of Muslims all over the Muslim world, and it has proven itself to be quite an effective means. Also, there's a book which was done by what's the brother's name? Ibrahim Abu Harb from Riyadh. I think it's called Understanding Islam also, or something like this too. It's quite nicely done, good quality. Brother's question, whether the Christians of today and the Jews are the same Christians and Jews referred to in the Quran. Yes, they are the same. By the time the Quran was revealed in the 8th, 7th century, Christianity had already become its distorted state that it is in today. The Gospels are already established, their practices of belief in Trinity, everything was already there. The early years when true Christianity still remained, and there were people upholding monotheism, Tawheed, people like the Bishop of Alexandria, Arius, and other people like James after Jesus' departure in Jerusalem, etc. That ended by the 3rd century, as a force to be reckoned with. After the 4th century, that was finished. From then onwards, Christianity as we know it had established itself. So the Quran was referring to the Jews and the Christians that we know today. What they were doing today, or what they are doing today, they did then. So when Allah says you can eat their slaughter, as you could do it then, you can do it today. You can eat their slaughter. However, the issue, because some people say, oh, they used to slaughter in the name of Allah. No. Back in the 7th century, they were not slaughtering in the name of Allah. You have to bring proof that that was the case. No. The point is that they slaughter, their slaughter we can eat. However, if in the process of their slaughtering, they kill the animal before cutting its neck, then what they are doing is cutting the neck of meta, or a carcass, which we are not allowed to eat. So if it is established that in the process of their slaughtering, they do cut the neck of the animal, even if they cut the neck right off, if they cut the neck of the animal while it is still alive, then that is halal. That's the law. It is halal. And those who argue that no, these Christians are different from the Christians and they have to do it exactly as we do it, and no. These are requirements and arguments which don't have a basis in the practice of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ nor of his Sahaba. When the meat was brought to him from Jews, he ate. He didn't ask them, how did you slaughter? But of course, if somebody comes and informs you that they are slaughtering the animals after they kill them, then you can't eat. Then you can't eat. Or if when they're cooking it in lard, or they're cooking it in other haram, along with other haram materials, they're cooking it along with pork products and things like this, then of course you don't eat because of the issue of it, these other things mixing in with it. But where it is clear and established that they have slaughtered, it is slaughtered by a society which is generally Christian. I mean, again, you don't have to establish that that particular chicken was slaughtered by a Christian in that slaughterhouse, because you do have Sikhs here. You do have others, right? But you are not required to establish exactly who slaughtered that. If you are in a country which is majority Christian, then you are allowed to assume that what is coming to you is Christian. Now if you go to a Sikh butcher shop, don't. You don't. If it's clear he is not a Christian or a Jew, then you don't buy from him. So, other than that, the basic principle is that it is permissible. But now, there's another consideration. If you have a choice between buying from Muslims and buying from non-Muslims, one would have to say that it is preferable to buy from Muslims. That Muslims should support each other, encourage in their businesses, help them be successful so they can give their zakah and benefit the Muslim community. It is important that our monies be circulated as much as we can amongst ourselves. So I would say, though it is permissible where we have a choice, it's better to purchase from Muslim shops, etc., etc. You stated that Muslims should not read the Torah or Bible. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Isn't it good to have some knowledge of these books for use during da'wah? See, if you understand that I didn't say that, then the other part of the question is not relevant. What I said is that we do not go to the Bible seeking guidance, seeking to know Allah's word. No. We may use verses from the Bible which confirm what the Quran says or what the Prophet ﷺ Sunnah says. We use that to support what supports Islamic teachings. But we don't go in and engage in discussions with the Christians about the interpretations of their texts in areas which Islam does not, or Islamic teachings does not confirm. You know? We don't do it. It's error. You spoke about what we should wear. Are women allowed to wear gold jewelry if it is visible? Rings, bracelets? Should we only wear it at home and weddings, etc.? Well, the general mass of Muslim scholarship holds that women may wear gold. The gold which is on the fingers, rings or bracelets, which naturally, if you're not covering your hands, it is exposed. This would be a part of the beauty which is naturally exposed and is not impermissible for you. You can do it, right? I mean, if one wore, for example, a nose ring, which was worn in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, you know, a ring in their nose or stud or whatever, for a woman it is permissible because this is a part of ornamentation which it is natural to be worn there. It was done in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and he didn't make any prescriptions pertaining to it. Wearing the wedding ring on the third finger. This is haram. In Islam, we have no wedding ring, first and foremost, nor engagement ring. And furthermore, the wearing of the ring on this third finger in Christian tradition is symbolic of one's belief in the Trinity. Any person who watched the coronation of Princess Diana, their marriage, the bishop put the ring by her thumb and said, "In the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, in the name of the Holy Ghost, Amen." That is the tradition. So not only is it forbidden from the point of view of it being Christian tradition, not Muslim tradition, wearing of a ring, a wedding ring. We don't have any wedding rings, so it's imitation. It is also shirk. It represents a belief of shirk, and so as Muslims we should not wear it. Wearing on the right hand was the sunnah. You said that if you read your fortune in the newspaper or anywhere else, your prayer is not accepted for 40 days and nights. What if you didn't know about this? Will your prayers still be nullified? No. If you didn't know and you did it this morning already, your prayers are not nullified. But now you know, if you go and do it tomorrow, your prayers will be nullified. What if you go to read your fortune but don't believe in it? Will your prayers still be nullified? Yes. That's what we said. There are two narrations concerning going to the fortune teller. The first one is going out of curiosity. your prayers are invalidated, or the reward is taken away for 40 days and nights. If you go and believe in it, the Prophet ﷺ said, you have disbelieved in what I brought. It means you disbelieve in Islam. It is an act of disbelief. Which duty is more obligatory? Marriage or seeking knowledge? Well, seeking knowledge is a basic obligation on all Muslims. Marriage is an obligation. Well, a number of scholars do hold as an obligation, or generally a recommendation for those who are able. But seeking knowledge is on you. You cannot say I'm unable. No, you have to go seek it. Everybody is able to seek. Now, whether you're able to get the knowledge or not, that's another issue. But seeking that knowledge, this is an obligation on you till you die. Marriage is a strong recommendation once you are able. As Prophet ﷺ said, Ya ma'ashara shabab man istata'a minkum al-ba'a falyatazawwaj. O young men and young women, whoever among you is able to get married should get married. And we as parents should encourage our sons and daughters to marry early. Delayal of marriage promotes corruption. I know when my son, who was 16, got married, people were shocked. Why are you married 16 years old? It's too young. No. It is the sunnah to marry young. Is the wearing of the nose ring okay, or should it be worn only in the home? It is okay to wear it. It's okay to wear it. Our sister's question is, young people's delaying marriage for secular educational purposes, is that permissible? Is this included in the seeking of knowledge? Well, the seeking of knowledge that we said, which was obligatory, this is religious knowledge. That is what is obligatory. Now, secular, or we call it academic knowledge, knowledge of the worldly things which benefit us in our worldly affairs, this may be what we call fard kifaya, or a community obligation for some women, for example, to learn medicine, to be able to treat women, and dentistry, to be able to treat women, so that the women are not put in a position of haram where they go to male doctors or male dentists. So it is obligatory on the community to produce some female dentists and female doctors, gynae, right? Doctors, OB-GYN doctors. So that is a community obligation. Marriage is a strong recommendation, and it is better if a woman has reached the age of marriage that she get married and pursue her education, if she's going into those areas which are beneficial, along with it. And it's very important actually for both males and females in going into fields of study. I mean, we have to be very careful about our intentions for study, what we're going into universities to study. That these fields that we go into, there is some kind of Islamic principles connected with it. The choice of areas to study should be areas which can be utilized and would be beneficial to the Muslim community. Fields of study where a person ends up in some research lab somewhere, making chemicals that God alone knows what they're going to go and do with it in the end. You shouldn't take these kind of fields. You should take very practical, direct benefit type fields where the Muslim community can come to you. We have a need as a community here, for example, in Ottawa. Muslims here have certain needs, whether they are in financial areas, building areas, or whatever. Muslims should go into the fields which will help to fulfill these community needs. Very important, because our seeking of knowledge should not be solely for our own benefit in this field. As the Prophet ﷺ said, and I quoted before, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The best of people are those who are most beneficial to others. So our knowledge should be not only for our own benefit, but for the benefit of others. The brother is asking whether the research has been done on the methods in North America, the methods used by slaughterhouses in slaughtering. A number of researches have been done. A number. I remember there was a series in the Juma magazine, put out by the Juma magazine. They did about 3 issues where they were gathering a lot of data on and presenting it on slaughter in North America. Their general conclusion was that the slaughter should be avoided because it's doubtful. This is what their general conclusion was from their research. And of course, where one feels doubt, then the Prophet ﷺ said, leave what gives you doubt and go to what doesn't give you doubt. So if you feel uncomfortable, personally, you feel uncomfortable, you feel doubtful about this which is coming to you, and you have a solid basis for that doubt, because of course some doubts don't have a basis, it is emotional or whatever else, and there's some doubts which have a factual basis. Where you have a factual based doubt, then it's better to avoid that thing and go to what doesn't give you any doubt. As I said, Muslims have financial needs. So financial needs meaning what? Not that they need interest-based banks. No, they don't. This is haram. They have financial needs, meaning that we need to develop some financial institutions which will allow Muslims to fulfill certain financial needs, like buying homes without interest, buying cars without having to pay installments and paying interest, and a variety of other things like this. We need to develop financial institutions which can protect Muslims from falling into these major sins. So that requires knowledge of this financial system as well as knowledge of Islamic finance. One needs to combine both to be able to develop alternatives. Now, Ibn Taymiyyah doesn't have a tafsir of Quran. What some researchers have done is they have collected from his rulings and writings, wherever he made some kind of interpretation of verse of the Quran, they've compiled it all together and called it a tafsir by Ibn Taymiyyah. You understand? So it means more than half the verses of the Quran don't have any tafsir or any explanation in that compilation. So he did not sit and write a tafsir, not like Ibn Kathir and others. And he did an introduction to tafsir which identifies these categories in the same way that Ibn Kathir did. Okay, the issue of mentioning the name of Allah over the slaughter. The verse, you have 2 verses in the Quran. Allah says you should not eat that on which other than Allah's name has been mentioned. And you should not eat that on which Allah's name has not been mentioned. 2 phrases. Right? You hear the difference between the two? That on which other than Allah's name has been mentioned, and that on which Allah's name has not been mentioned. 2 things. The scholars of tafsir have interpreted that on which Allah's name has not been mentioned by that on which other than Allah's name has been mentioned. Understand? Meaning that when Allah said that on which Allah's name has not been mentioned, meaning another name other than Allah's was mentioned. That is what is forbidden. Because a Muslim who slaughters an animal and forgets to say Bismillah, can you eat it? Yes. In America, Muslims are buying cars and houses, having them financed with interest and loans. Please elaborate. Haram. Just plain old haram. We don't need too much elaboration on that one. And those people who say it is necessity, unfortunately, you have some people who have promoted this idea of it being necessity. Actually, the first Muslim scholar to say that was Muhammad Abdu in Egypt at the turn of the century. He was the first one to put that out. This is when the colonization was complete there in Egypt. The banks had all been introduced. He made the ruling that it was permissible to take interest because it became a financial necessity. However, this argument is false, because what is classified as durura in the Sharia has been defined by the scholars as that which will cause, a circumstance which will cause either the loss of life or limb. The loss of life or limb. L-I-M-B. Right? Meaning, either you're going to die or you're going to get very ill. Major harm. You need a heart operation. You don't have the money. Nobody will lend it to you. The only way you can do it is get a loan from the bank, save your life. You're permitted to do it. Now, for you to say, I'm going to get that loan. This operation cost me $10,000 or $50,000, whatever. I'm going to get that loan. But since I'm there anyway, let me get another $100,000 and buy a house. Haram. What was enough to save your life, that was permitted. What is above it, 1 penny above it, is haram. So haram that the Prophet ﷺ said interest has over 30 different branches. The simplest of its branches is equivalent to a man having sexual relations with his mother. The loosely used term fees, where a bank or Islamic institution charges you certain fees, these, one has to look at it. Are these legitimate? Because if they're going to do some operation for you, people are hired, people are working, they're calculating, they're making out papers, these type of things, so there are costs involved. So there are legitimate fees that they can charge. But then again, there may also be fees which are illegitimate and becomes just a misnomer for interest. So where we have identified that it is false, it's not acceptable. And I should note, also mention that in the Arab world, interest is called fa'ida. Right? Fa'ida means benefit. They've changed the name from riba, which is everybody knows is haram, and you don't want to talk about, I'm going to go get my riba. So they now call it fa'ida. And this is one of the signs of the last day about which the Prophet ﷺ spoke, that people would call riba and alcohol by other than its name. You know? Is it obligatory for women to wear socks or cover their entire feet outside their houses? No. I explained that already. Wearing of socks is not obligatory. What I said is they should wear a outer garment which should come down to the tops of their feet, covering the tops of their feet. That is what is required. If they wish to wear socks, they may do so, but it's not a requirement. If you are designated to ask a question, to say Salam Alaikum here is inappropriate. It's inappropriate. And it's common practice. People want to ask, this is Salam Alaikum. No. No. Assalamu alaikum, when you're meeting a person for the first time, you say Assalamu alaikum. This is the place for Assalamu alaikum. Right? A scheme by which an institution buys the home for you, and you put in a certain amount of money, they put in the greater amount of money, and you pay something like rent to them. It's like rent to own kind of situation. You have a down payment and then you pay rent, and eventually that rent is counted towards the paying off of the house, and eventually you own it. Not like that? Huh? It's calculated against. Well, you know, the point is that the details of this, one needs to go back to scholars of Islamic finance. You know, where you have an institution which has a board of reputable Muslim scholars, and they have identified and analyzed the details of this, because you're giving me something of it and there may be other details which I'm not aware of, etc. You know, so I wouldn't want to make any pronouncements in this area. You know, where you have a reputable board and they have deemed this particular transaction permissible Islamically, then you go on the basis of that ruling. You know, if you have doubt about their ruling, then avoid it. You know, otherwise, as Allah tells us, we ask those who know if you don't know. So you go to the institution, they say we have this board, it has such and such a scholar on it, such and such a scholar, we know these to be reputable scholars, and they have ruled this is permissible, then you go along with it. If it was not, and they deliberately made it permissible when it really wasn't, then they carry the sin. You have done your part. Your part is you have gone to the knowledgeable and you have gotten a ruling from them. That's what I say, okay? The issue of car insurance, where the use of a car becomes necessary to earn the money to feed your children. Without the use of that car, you're unable to earn that which would feed your children, and forcing you to beg instead, you know, then you have a situation here of necessity. So in this case, they permit insurance, but it should be third party, you know, the minimum. Anytime one is in a forced circumstance, you're only allowed to do the minimum necessary to fulfill what is required. If the credit card is functioning as what they call a debit card, meaning that you have a fixed amount there which you can use and you're not signing any contract of interest, then it is permissible. But once you sign a contract of interest, meaning if you overdraw, you have agreed to pay interest, then that card is haram. If you bought a home on interest before you became a Muslim, Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Islam yajubbu ma qabla. Islam cancels what came before it. Just to repeat that, if a person has a checking account which has no interest, but you can only get that checking account by getting a savings account which would give you interest first, and you don't put any money in the savings account, so you're not accruing any interest, is that arrangement halal? Well, one would have to say, when you make your contract with the bank, you sign a contract agreeing that you would receive interest. That is haram. Whether you actually do or you don't, the signing of that contract is haram. Prophet ﷺ said 4 people are involved in the interest: the witness, the one who draws up the contract, the one who gives it, and the one who receives it. So once you have signed that contract, whether you actually receive it or you don't receive it, you have entered into an interest contract or interest transaction, which is haram. The witness. No, I'm meaning if you do a business deal, for example, and there's interest involved in that business deal and you need witnesses, all those who sign that contract as witnesses to that contract, they fall into the sin also. We'll stop. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant.